People don't fail because they lack time, talent, or opportunity. They fail because they refuse to let go of the version of themselves that no longer works. And today, I'm going to show you how, within just 7 days, you can become so disciplined, so focused, and so intentional that the person you are right now becomes unrecognizable. Most people want change. Very few people want transformation. Because transformation demands a funeral for the old you. Let me tell you something, most people won't. You don't become unrecognizable by adding more. You become unrecognizable by subtracting what no longer serves you. And it starts with a decision. Day 1, decide who you're done being, not who you want to be, who you are no longer willing to tolerate. The problem isn't that you don't know what to do. The problem is you've been negotiating with a version of yourself that should have been fired a long time ago. When your standards change, your behavior has no choice but to follow. Day 2, change the inputs. Your life is a reflection of what you consistently allow into your mind. You can't consume distraction all day and expect discipline tomorrow. You can't feed your mind garbage and expect greatness to show up. For 7 days, audit your inputs. If it doesn't educate you, elevate you, or energize you, it's gone. Not forever, just long enough to remind your brain who's in control. Day 3, raise the standard. Goals are things you hope to achieve. Standards are rules you refuse to break. Winners don't ask, how do I feel today? They ask, what does my standard require? When your standard is high, excuses feel embarrassing, and when excuses disappear, results accelerate. Day 4, take radical ownership. Everything in your life is either a result or an excuse. And here's the truth. Blame feels good, but it keeps you weak. Ownership feels heavy, but it makes you powerful. The moment you stop saying this happened to me and start saying I allowed this is the moment your life starts to change. Day 5, execute without emotion. Consistency is not built on motivation. It's built on identity. You don't wait to feel ready. You move, and readiness shows up later. Discipline first. Confidence second. Results last. Do the work when it's boring. Do the work when no one is watching. That's how you separate yourself from the crowd. Day 6, shift your identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Stop saying, I'm trying. Start saying, this is who I am now. When your identity shifts, your habits obey automatically. Day 7, lock it in. By day 7, you won't just feel different, you'll think different. And when your thinking changes, your future has no choice but to follow. You won't be unrecognizable because you changed your clothes, your circle, or your routine. You'll be unrecognizable because you decided. And once that decision is made, there is no going back. Most people spend their lives trying to become someone new without ever making the harder decision of letting someone old go. They say they want growth, success, discipline, confidence, but they still protect the habits, excuses, and identities that created their current reality. Transformation does not begin with adding new routines or chasing new goals. It begins with a firm, non-negotiable decision that there is a version of you that is no longer allowed to exist. Not because you hate yourself, but because you respect your future too much to keep dragging your past along with you. You must reach a point where certain behaviors embarrass you, where certain patterns feel unacceptable, where certain excuses sound ridiculous coming out of your own mouth. Until that moment arrives, change will always be optional, and anything optional eventually gets postponed. You don't rise by hoping to do better tomorrow. You rise by drawing a line today. A line that says, I am no longer the person who procrastinates and calls it patience. I am no longer the person who waits for motivation before taking action. I am no longer the person who blames circumstances, people, or timing for results I didn't earn. This decision is uncomfortable because it removes your safety net. It forces you to confront the truth that the life you want is being blocked not by lack of knowledge, but by tolerance. Tolerance for distraction. Tolerance for inconsistency. Tolerance for a self-image that no longer fits the future you say you want. The moment you decide who you are no longer willing to be, something powerful happens, your standards change. And when standards change, behavior follows automatically. You stop asking, do I feel like doing this? and start asking, is this acceptable for the person I'm becoming? That shift alone separates leaders from followers, winners from wishers, because feelings fluctuate, but standards enforce consistency. You don't need more discipline when your standards are clear. You don't need more confidence when your identity is defined. You don't need external accountability when internal expectations are non-negotiable. This decision also requires honesty, brutal honesty. You must tell yourself the truth about what you've been settling for, what you've been avoiding, and what you've been pretending not to see. Not to shame yourself, but to wake yourself up. Growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from clarity. And clarity often arrives when you admit that the old version of you was built for survival, not success. It did what it could with what it knew. But now you know more, and knowing more demands becoming more. When you decide who you were no longer willing to be, you stop negotiating with weakness. You stop giving yourself permission to stay small. You stop romanticizing struggle and start respecting progress. You understand that every time you tolerate what you shouldn't, you teach yourself who you are. And every time you refuse what no longer serves you, you redefine yourself. This is not about perfection. It's about direction. It's about choosing daily to act in alignment with the future you instead of loyalty to the past you. 7 days may not change your entire life, but one decision can. And the most powerful decision you can make is this: the old version of me has expired. From this moment forward, I move differently, I think differently, and I act differently, not because it's easy, but because staying the same is no longer an option. Most people try to change their results without ever changing what's producing those results. They want better habits, better income, better relationships, better confidence, but they keep feeding their minds the same information, the same conversations, the same distractions, and the same emotional triggers. Then they wonder why nothing changes. Outputs are never random. They are always the byproduct of inputs. Your thoughts come from what you consume. Your decisions come from what you think, and your results come from the decisions you repeatedly make. If you don't like the direction your life is going, the first place you need to look is not your effort, but your exposure. Everything you allow into your mind is programming you. The music you listen to, the videos you watch, the people you talk to, the environments you sit in, none of it is neutral. It's either reinforcing who you've been or shaping who you're becoming. Most people underestimate the power of repetition. They think a single book won't matter, or a single conversation won't affect them, or a few hours of distraction won't do damage. But repetition is how beliefs are formed. Repetition is how identities are built. And repetition is how futures are created. If you repeatedly feed your mind low standards, short-term thinking, and emotional reasoning, your life will eventually reflect that, even if you work hard. You cannot expect disciplined action from a distracted mind. You cannot expect confidence from constant comparison. You cannot expect clarity when your attention is constantly fractured. Yet that's exactly what many people attempt to do every day. They wake up, flood their brain with noise, drama, and stimulation, and then expect themselves to perform at a high level. Doesn't work that way. Before you can demand more from yourself, you must first protect your mind. Focus is not a personality trait. It's a consequence of what you allow in and what you deliberately shut out. Changing your inputs is not about becoming extreme or disconnected from the world. It's about becoming intentional. It's about recognizing that your mind is valuable real estate and not everything deserves access. When you start filtering what you consume, you reclaim control over how you think and how you feel. You stop reacting to everything and start responding with purpose. You become less emotionally driven and more principle driven. And that shift alone creates a massive upgrade in your decision making. When you improve your inputs, your standards begin to rise naturally. You start thinking bigger without forcing it. You start expecting more from yourself without feeling overwhelmed. You start seeing possibilities where you once saw limitations. That's not magic, that's alignment. When your mind is consistently exposed to growth, discipline, and possibility, your actions follow in that direction. You don't have to fight yourself as much because you're no longer feeding the part of you that wants to quit, procrastinate, or stay comfortable. If you want to become unrecognizable in a short period of time, you don't start by demanding extraordinary output. You start by engineering better input. For a focused window of time, you become ruthless about what you listen to, what you watch, what you read, and who you give access to your thoughts. Not because everything else is bad, but because your future deserves priority. Once your inputs change, your thinking shifts. Once your thinking shifts, your behavior adjusts. And once your behavior adjusts, your results have no choice but to follow. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they tolerate too much from themselves. They accept levels of effort, focus, and behavior that do not match the life they say they want. And as long as that tolerance exists, nothing changes. Standards are the invisible rules you live by. They quietly dictate what you do, what you accept, and what you walk away from. The moment you adopt a higher standard, your life begins to reorganize itself around that decision. Not gradually, immediately. A higher standard is not a goal you hope to reach one day. It is a rule you decide to live by right now. Goals say, I'll try. Standards say, this is non-negotiable. When you set a higher standard, you stop waiting for the perfect mood, the right timing, or external pressure. You act because that's who you've decided to be. And this is where most people hesitate, because higher standards remove excuses. They eliminate comfort. They expose gaps between who you are and who you claim you want to become. The reason immediate adoption matters is simple. Delayed standards are imaginary standards. If you say, I'll be more disciplined next month, what you're really saying is, my current behavior is acceptable for now. And whatever you accept, you reinforce. High performers don't wait until life forces them to change. They raise their standards before the consequences arrive. They don't ask what's easy, they ask what's required. They don't measure themselves against others, they measure themselves against what they know they're capable of. When your standards rise, your language changes. You stop saying, I can't, and start saying, I don't. You don't skip commitments. You don't tolerate laziness disguised as self-care. You don't allow inconsistency to hide behind busyness. This isn't about being harsh with yourself. It's about being honest. A higher standard doesn't punish you. It protects your future. It creates boundaries that keep you aligned when motivation disappears. Adopting a higher standard also clarifies your decisions. You no longer debate every action. You no longer drain energy deciding whether to show up, put in effort, or follow through. The decision has already been made by your standard. This creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates identity. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes normal, not because life got easier, but because you grew into the standard you set. Many people wait for confidence before raising their standard, but confidence is a byproduct, not a prerequisite. You earn confidence by keeping promises to yourself. Every time you live up to a higher standard, you reinforce trust in yourself. Every time you violate it, you weaken that trust. That's why standards must be adopted immediately and lived daily. Not perfectly, but consistently. A higher standard forces you to grow into alignment. Your habits adjust. Your circle shifts. Your priorities sharpen. Things that once felt acceptable start to feel out of place. And that's how real transformation happens. Not through dramatic moments, but through quiet decisions repeated daily. The decision to expect more from yourself, starting now, not later, if you want to become unrecognizable. Don't wait for life to demand more of you. Demand more of yourself. Decide that average effort, inconsistent execution, and low expectations are no longer options. The moment you adopt a higher standard, immediately, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. And once that happens, your results don't have to be chased. They follow. Most people don't realize how much power they give away every time they make an excuse. An excuse feels harmless in the moment. It sounds reasonable. It even feels comforting. But over time, excuses become a lifestyle, and that lifestyle quietly trains you to stay where you are. Excuses shift responsibility away from you and place it on circumstances, people, timing, or luck. And the moment responsibility leaves your hands, so does your power to change anything. That's why real transformation requires eliminating excuses completely and replacing them with ownership. Total P, personal, and unapologetic ownership. Ownership begins with a hard truth. Everything in your life is either a result of your actions or a result of your tolerance. Even when things happen that are outside your control, How you respond to them is always within your control. Excuses focus on what happened to you. Ownership focuses on what you're going to do about it. This shift is uncomfortable because it removes your ability to justify staying the same. But discomfort is the price of growth. And avoidance is the price of stagnation when you eliminate excuses. You stop lying to yourself in subtle ways. You stop saying, I didn't have time, when the truth is you didn't prioritize it. You stop saying, I'm not ready, when the truth is you're afraid of failing or being judged. You stop saying, this isn't the right moment, when the truth is the moment will never feel perfect. Ownership doesn't make you cruel to yourself. It makes you clear with yourself. And clarity creates momentum. Replacing excuses with ownership also changes how you see obstacles. Instead of viewing challenges as proof that something isn't meant for you, you begin to see them as signals that growth is required. Ownership asks different questions. Not why is this happening to me? But what must I learn from this? Not who is at fault, but what is my responsibility here? These questions are empowering because they keep you in the driver's seat of your life. As ownership becomes your default, your confidence grows. Not because life gets easier, but because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes next. You stop waiting for permission. You stop needing validation. You stop outsourcing your self-worth to external results. You become someone who acts, adjusts, and advances. Mistakes no longer define you, they inform you. Failures no longer discourage you, they refine you. Excuses keep you emo. Shinnily comfortable, but strategically stuck. Ownership may feel heavy at first, but it builds strength. It turns setbacks into lessons and effort into progress. When you fully own your actions, your habits improve. When you own your habits, your character strengthens. And when your character strengthens, your results elevate. Becoming unrecognizable doesn't require perfection. It requires responsibility. The moment you decide that excuses are no longer allowed in your internal dialogue, everything changes. You stop explaining, you start executing, you stop defending your limitations and start expanding your capacity. Ownership is not about blame, it's about power. And the more ownership you take, the more control you gain over the direction of your life. Most people believe progress comes from feeling motivated, inspired, or confident. That belief is one of the biggest reasons they stay inconsistent. Feelings are unstable. They change with mood, energy, weather, opinions, and circumstances. If your execution depends on how you feel, your results will always be unpredictable. Real progress comes from showing up daily, especially on the days you don't feel like it. Not because it's easy, but because consistency is built on commitment, not emotion. Execution is the great separator. Everyone has intentions, everyone has plans, everyone has moments of excitement. Very few people execute when the excitement fades. The ability to act without emotional permission is what creates momentum. And momentum, once built, becomes confidence. You don't wait to feel confident to act, you act until confidence becomes inevitable. Action leads, feelings follow. When you execute daily, you train your mind to obey decisions instead of moods. You teach yourself that discomfort is not a stop sign. It's a signal that growth is happening. On days when you feel tired, unmotivated, or doubtful, execution becomes even more powerful because it reinforces identity. You're no longer someone who works when it's convenient, you're someone who works because it's required. That shift alone changes how you see yourself and how others experience you. Executing daily does not mean pushing at maximum intensity every day. It means maintaining a standard. It means doing the work at a level that keeps you moving forward, even if the pace is slower than you'd like. Progress compounds through consistency, not intensity. Small actions repeated daily outperform sporadic bursts of effort driven by emotion. This is how trust with yourself is built. One completed action at a time. The days you don't feel like executing are the days that matter most. Anyone can show up when it feels good. Anyone can work when they're praised, energized, or inspired. But showing up when no one is watching, when progress feels invisible, and when doubt is loud. That's where discipline is forged. Discipline is not punishment. It's proof of self-respect. It's the willingness to do today what your future will thank you for tomorrow. Daily execution also simplifies life. You stop overthinking. You stop negotiating. You stop making excuses that sound reasonable but produce nothing. The question is no longer, do I feel like it? The question becomes, what's the next action? And once you ask that question, clarity replaces confusion. Movement replaces stagnation. Becoming unrecognizable in a short period of time doesn't require extraordinary talent. It requires ordinary actions performed without emotional dependence. When you execute daily, even when you don't feel like it, you build a version of yourself that is reliable, disciplined, and resilient. And once you become that person, success is no longer something you chase, it's something you consistently create. Most people allow their circumstances tell them who they are. They let their current results define their confidence, their environment dictate their effort, and their past experiences shape their expectations. This is why so many remain stuck. Circumstances are temporary, unstable, and often misleading, yet they are given permanent authority over identity. Real transformation begins when you reverse that order, when you decide who you are first and then allow your actions to align with that identity, regardless of what your current situation looks like. Identity is the most powerful force in human behavior. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are, not who you wish you could be. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you will justify inconsistency. If you see yourself as disciplined, you will find ways to act disciplined even when it's uncomfortable. Circumstances may influence your options, but identity determines your choices, and choices repeated over time shape outcomes. When you align with identity instead of circumstances, you stop using your environment as an excuse. You don't say, I'll be focused when things calm down, or I'll be confident when I get better results. You decide, I am focused, and then you act in ways that prove it. You decide, I am disciplined, and you show up accordingly. Identity-led behavior doesn't wait for permission from reality. It creates new reality through consistent action. This alignment requires internal leadership. You begin leading yourself instead of reacting to external pressure. You stop asking, what's happening around me? And start asking, who do I choose to be in this moment? That question shifts power back into your hands. Circumstances can be chaotic, unfair, or limiting, but they cannot control your standards unless you allow them to. Identity gives you something stable to stand on when everything else feels uncertain. Aligning with identity also changes how you interpret setbacks. Instead of seeing obstacles as evidence that you're not capable, you see them as tests of alignment. A disciplined person doesn't quit because progress is slow. A focused person doesn't scatter attention because results aren't immediate. A committed person doesn't retreat because things get hard. When identity is clear, behavior becomes predictable, even under pressure. Many people wait for their circumstances to improve before they change how they think, speak, or act. But circumstances improve only after behavior changes, and behavior changes only after identity shifts. This is why trying to change habits without changing identity feels exhausting. You're forcing actions that don't match your self-image. But when identity leads, habits follow naturally. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're expressing who you've decided to be. Becoming unrecognizable isn't about pretending or performing. It's about alignment. It's about acting from the inside out. When you align with identity instead of circumstances, you move with intention instead of reaction. You stop shrinking to fit your environment and start expanding to match your potential. And once identity becomes your anchor, no temporary situation has the power to pull you off course. Most people wait for a moment that changes everything. But transformation doesn't come from a moment. It comes from a decision followed by alignment. Over the last 7